Welcome to a special presentation of Winter is Coming. I'm going to have a class on Florida-friendly gardening in your winter garden on Wednesday, but nature decided to bring us a freeze Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. So I thought, well, let's do a short class on what we can do to get ready for the cold weather that's coming here in Hernando County in the next few days. So welcome to Winter is Coming. I am Lilly Browning. I work for Hernando County Utilities, and I am the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program Coordinator. What are the chances, if you're new here, what are the chances that we are going to have a frost or a freeze? Well, there's a 50% chance that we'll have our first frost by December 10th. And we will have that by December 1st. So we have reached those statistics. And there's a 50% chance of our last frost by February 1st. I would generally say here in Hernando County, the last chance of frost is generally considered to be around March 15th. We have had frosts on April 3rd before, but that is highly unusual. Generally, March 15th is a good rule of thumb to know we're not going to have frost or freezes anymore. But here we are, we're getting ready for a freeze that's going to occur on December 1st, December 2nd. Just remember, it's not unheard of, it's not unusual. Our temperature has fallen below 32 degrees more than 75 times in the last 20 years. This is not an unusual event. There is a winter in Florida, usually lasts 3 days at a time in different little spurts. So by about Wednesday morning at around 7 a.m. Here in Hernando County, we're going to reach the freezing mark, Wednesday, December 2nd. So, I'm going to just get you ready for what you can expect and how you can prepare. The first thing I want you to know is that we want to just say no to lollipops when it comes to trying to protect our plants or our trees, our sensitive trees, with covers. Now, if you have native plants, and they are the right plant in the right place and the right plant for this area, they're going to do just fine. They may freeze, that might happen because that's part of nature, but especially this particular cold front coming up, it's only going to be 32, right around the freezing mark for a very short period of time. So I am not expecting any kind of major damage to occur from this. Now, if you do have tropical plants that are frost sensitive, meaning they could be in trouble in the 40s, then you need to take steps to protect them. You need to bring them in if they're potted plants, or find ways to protect them. So if you have plants that you're concerned with, you will drive around in the next few days and you will see a lot of people creating lollipops out of their trees or out of, various shrubs and things like that. Well, we put on a blanket when we're cold, don't we? We wrap up in a blanket. And the reason we do that is because as mammals, that helps us retain the heat that we generate. Plants don't generate their own heat. So what are we trying to do when we're covering it with some sort of cloth? We're not trying to help the plant bundle up and stay warm like we would think of for ourselves or an animal. Here in Florida, our ground never freezes. There's no such thing as permafrost. Really, the coldest the ground is going to get is probably around 48 degrees. So what you are trying to do when you're trying to protect a plant by covering it up is capturing the radiant heat from the ground. That is what you're attempting to do. So the air might be 32, might be 28, depending where you are, but the ground's gonna probably not even get as cold as 48 because this is, a rather sudden cold front. So the ground's going to be pretty warm, 50s possibly. So what you're trying to do is capture that radiant heat emanating from the ground. Therefore, a cloth should serve as a tent to capture the heat to protect the plant. Wrapping the plant up like a lollipop is not going to accomplish anything at all for you. Here are some ways that you can protect your plants. The ideal situation, somebody here has gotten a hold of tiny little tents that were created to protect plants. That is absolutely the most correct way. In the most correct scenario, you will cover up that plant and have nothing actually touching the plant. It'll just be a nice dome capturing the ground heat for the plant. Boxes might work if the plant is small enough. There are several ways to accomplish that, but sometimes the plant is just too big and there's no way we can just encompass it like a dome without touching the plant. In that instance, coverings are fine, but you want to make sure they are cloth, no plastic. Plastic will transfer the cold to the surface of the leaves and cause more damage. So even sheets, even old sheets would be better than a plastic covering. And just what you'd want to make sure is that whatever cover you're using drapes all the way down to the ground, or else, again, you're not accomplishing anything. You're not just throwing over a blanket over the plant to say, oh, you're cold. No, you're trying to capture that radiant heat. So the cloth that you use must reach all the way to the ground and kind of sprawl on the ground a little. And you might want to use some kind of weights to keep it down, to keep it from blowing away. And of course, this freeze isn't going to last very long. So you're going to want to, by late Wednesday morning, uncover the plants because they're going to still need the sun. They still need photosynthesis, and we don't want to just keep them covered for days at a time. Now, you may have potted plants that you think are too big to bring in. Well, remember now, the potted plant's roots are not in the ground where it's nice and warm, warmer than the air. So this way they tried to do this on the left, they are using a frost cloth, and that's a great thing to use, but they're really accomplishing nothing, trying to protect just the foliage when the soil in that pot could very well freeze. So either get something that's going to cover it all and drape on the ground, or just go ahead and drag that pot into the garage or somewhere. The one on the right is a little bit better because it does reach all the way to the ground, and they're kind of using a tomato cage upside down there, but it also, it doesn't have any guaranteed effects. One thing you can do is push all of your potted plants, if you have a lot, together, maybe up against a wall of your house, and creating a little microclimate to help hold in heat there as well. Here's what you absolutely should not try to do, and I know this time you're probably not going to try because it's only going to be right at freezing for a very short period of time. But if we have a cold snap where it gets really, really cold, and for those of you who are new here, we have seen below 20 degrees. Many times it's not that unusual. Hasn't happened in a good decade, but generally it is part of living here. So when that happens, our blueberry farmers, our strawberry farmers, you'll see them on the news and they'll be all bleary-eyed where they stayed up all night. And what they are trying to do is insulate their plants to keep them exactly at about 33 degrees in those little insulated blankets of ice to stop them from freezing. This is not recommended for home landscape protection. First of all, you're not allowed to run your sprinklers continuously. I mean, they're on a different schedule. They're going to switch zones. It may not be your day to run your irrigation, and then you could get in trouble for that. Also, what happens when the farmers are doing this? As I said, you're going to run your zone for whatever length of time, then it's going to move on to different zones. What the farmers do is this is continuously running water, because if they stop, then what happens is the continuous freezing of water on the plants and the heat that is released at that time, at that very millisecond, it's an exact science, keeps the plant cells at a temperature of about 33. If the water stops or moves on to the next zone, bam, the plant freezes. This is not practical for a homeowner. It is not allowed for a homeowner. You're not going to stay up all night making sure that each zone is running continuously. It's just not a practice that a homeowner should try to do. If a freeze is predicted, one of the best things to do is to water the roots of the plants well before the freeze event comes. You know what generally happens though? Just like this time, nature usually does that for us. It seems like cold fronts come in with bands of rain, and then they go out again with bands of rain. So I think you're going to be okay, with the rains that came in early this Monday morning. But if you want to go out with a handheld hose that has a self-canceling nozzle, not with your irrigation system, unless it is it's already your day, and wet the soil down, be real careful to bend down and try to get as much of the soil and as little as the plants. Don't do this just an hour or two before the freeze is supposed to come. Do it, 8, 12 hours before. And wet the soil, because the wet soil will absorb the heat during the day. That's what you want it to do. That's why you want to do it in the morning. Nature did it for us. Fantastic. This Monday morning, we had storms come through. So the soil is going to be a little moist, and, it'll radiate heat during the day and hold on to it during the evening. You can slightly moisten the soil in the late afternoon before a freeze. But I would be very, very, very careful of the foliage. You don't want a freeze right on the foliage itself. So let's say you didn't do any of this. You're away, or you just didn't get to it, and you go out and you see something like this. Well, don't panic. It happens. As I said, we're in Central Florida, here in Hernando County. We're not in North Florida. We do have we're not in North Florida where they do have freezes. We're not in South Florida where they generally don't. And so there may be plants that we have that do well all, 3 seasons, and then whammo, they get zapped like one of these. This cold front that's coming through right now is going to be so quick in and out, and only really just tap the freezing point, that you're not going to do any damage to any roots. So even if some of the leaves get damaged, don't panic. It happens. And here's what you can do. You're going to want to prune it because it's ugly. But really the best thing you can do, since we're getting such an early frost, maybe we'll get more. I really don't know. But remember, I told you, generally the danger of frost isn't over until March 15th. So leave it there, even though you're not going to like how it looks. But remember, it is winter. And those leaves will actually, what may happen is it'll warm up. I guarantee you it'll warm up, and new growth may start to occur. And then we'll have possibly another freeze event. Well, these leaves can help protect that tender new growth. So don't prune it off, and don't fertilize it. The last thing you really want to do is encourage new growth, because new growth is very susceptible to freezing. And see, this old growth that froze, it's going to act as a barrier and protection. But any new growth, if it's out there in the elements and it freezes, it's so close to the base of the plant, it could actually do a lot more damage to the plant. So after we have a freeze, you can go out and water. Again, if it's not your watering day, don't turn on your irrigation system. Use a handheld hose or your rain barrel water, handheld hose with a self-canceling nozzle. But the only thing we can do after that is wait, and wait patiently for the winter to go by. Mulching does help. Mulching has lots of benefits. It prevents the loss of water, suppresses weeds, adds some nutrient holding capacity to the soil and water holding capacity as it breaks down. And so remember I talked about where the heat is coming from the soil. So the mulch helps keep that radiant heat in and keeps those roots from freezing. It insulates the soil. One other thing I want to mention is that when you're talking about watering, there's bedding plants. Your lawn, remember I mentioned that it's winter. It may have been warm most of the time, but your lawn still knows it's winter because it's dark. It's dark at 5:30. So the shorter daylight hours and your lawn goes into a semi-dormant state, even here in Florida, and it really is not actively growing. I'm sure you've noticed you don't have to mow it near as much. So, and it has sloughed off a good part of its root system. So you don't need to water it once a week when it is not actively growing. You can easily skip a week of watering and set your time clock to do that. If you're worried about when you should water, go out and have a talk with your lawn. The things that'll do is it'll have a blue-gray tint if it needs watered. That's kind of subjective, so I don't really understand that. That would be hard to see, but the other two are pretty obvious. You're going to walk across and your footprints are going to remain there for, a period of time. That's showing that the blades are losing elasticity or becoming dehydrated. Or look real close and the blades are starting to fold in half, trying to conserve water. Those two signs are what I would go by, that, okay, now my lawn has told me, hey, when it's my watering day again, please give me some water. Other than that, you can skip a week. If 14 days go by and it still looks okay, skip another week. It's winter. They don't need as much water. We are coming soon upon our fertilizer blackout period. January 1st through March 31st, Hernando County homeowners are not allowed to apply fertilizers to their lawn. There are several rules with this. Professional applicators are allowed to, if they are trained, certified, and registered according to the terms of Hernando County, and they can only apply slow release. Generally, we don't, just like we don't want to be watering too much, now's not the time to be fertilizing. Even though we're not quite in the blackout period yet, that probably should have been done around October, because we don't want to do anything to encourage new growth. Turf, just like the other plants I spoke of, if you're encouraging new growth, that new growth is very susceptible to freeze damage. It's been many years since we lost any Floratam lawns to actually freezing to death, but it has happened. Again, if we reached below 28 for 4 or more hours, your St. Augustine Floratam lawns could be in danger of actually freezing to death. Said it's been a good decade since that has happened. So we don't want to do anything, though, that encourages new growth, because new growth at this time is especially susceptible to bringing freeze damage to the rest of the plant. We don't want to use weed and feed products. I already said now is not a time to fertilize. So it's You don't want to use those combo products at any time because those are two different events that should happen at two different times of the year here in Central Florida. So just say no to the weed and feed products. If you're worried about spring weeds that may come up, go ahead and get a pre-emergent for those summer and spring annual weeds like crabgrass. You want to do that mid-February, somewhere to March 1st before they start coming up. And that is not the time to fertilize. That's why we say, it's one of the reasons we say not to use any weed and feed type products. Now's not the time to prune your plants either. Some deciduous trees, yes, you can prune them now. But if it's a spring blooming shrub or tree, you'll won't have any flowers in the spring if you prune them now. You need to have had that pruned by June 30th. So pruning after that you won't have any of your spring flowers. And as I keep mentioning, new growth is very susceptible to freeze damage. But any deciduous trees that don't flower, except for crepe myrtles, you can prune those now and through the winter, but that's going to be a whole different lesson in how to prune those properly. The only thing I'll say right now is please don't severely prune them like you see done in many areas. If you look back on my Facebook page, we have videos and things that show you how to properly prune a crepe myrtle. Here's the biggest thing. Don't expect perfection. It's okay if your lawn is not green right now. I know it's very hard for some of us to accept that, but it is winter. So we don't have snow on our yards, but it is perfectly natural for our grass to turn. Some people say brown, some people say straw colored. I'm going to go with golden. Just think of it that way. In the winter, our lawns are naturally golden, like golden waves of grain. So it's okay. If you have a Bahia grass lawn, that's going to green up with the first spring rain. You can almost stand there and watch it turn green. Your St. Augustine will be the same. So it's okay if you don't have a green lawn. I know some of you may live in deed restricted communities that demand green lawns all year long, but you also still can skip that week of irrigation and maintain the green lawn. But just remember, all of our grasses are warm season grasses. The grass you had up north, the Kentucky ryegrass or the different fescues, in the mid-August, if you've had a drought, they turned brown like this, didn't they? Yet they're green under the snow. You know, why is that? Because they're cool season grasses. We have warm season grasses. So just remember, it's okay. The golden lawns are okay. And don't prune those damaged plants until at least March 15th. If it's a very, very herbaceous plant, perhaps you can a little earlier. But if it's a large plant, just wait, just live with the ugly. Unfortunately, we have to do that. And remember, it's winter. We're not tropical. So it's okay to look like winter here as well. Thank you very much for listening to this short program. I wanted to get this out there because of the freeze that's coming. But we're still having our class on Wednesday at 10 a.m. called Your Florida Winter Landscape. I just wanted to pull out the freeze protection portions of that class to share with you early because nature didn't cooperate with my schedule, so I have to keep up with it. But join me for that class. Below is my email address. You can find that class if you miss it on Hernando County Government's YouTube channel. And this little presentation should be on there soon as well. Your Florida Winter Landscape will cover a little bit of this frost and freeze protection and what to do afterwards. but we'll talk about the other things that you can do in your yard during the winter. I'll probably cover more on that crepe myrtle pruning, and we'll talk about winter annuals and winter bloomers. That will be a lot of fun for us. Thank you, and stay warm out there.